Good morning. My name is Dick Taylor, stroke survivor at Emory University Hospital. Here to talk about my experience on camera. So I ended up in Emory Midtown Hospital in the middle of September last year to have a hip replacement on my left hip. I was actually quite excited to have that done. Because I like to exercise and I try to stay fit, and so there I found myself at 7 a.m. at Emory Midtown to have this hip replacement, and we did. And I spent the day in the hospital, and it was a huge success. And they had slated me to return home the next day. I was elated and quite happy with the whole thing. And it turns out around close to midnight that night, I suffered a stroke. I was lying in bed and suffered a stroke. I'm lying there and my left side was pretty much affected and nothing moved. I was lying in this bed, and it was quite an event for me because my left hand wouldn't move first and foremost. I couldn't raise my arm. Could not raise my leg on the left side. So I was pretty well strapped to that bed. And so it was just something I could not gather in. It was more than I could conceive of, because why me? You know, I was healthy, and I was fit and ready to go. And it happened. So that was the stroke. It's an amazing experience because none of us are thinking about something like that. And then when it happens, it's kind of, you know, the trite say, it's a very trite saying, but it's the why me, you know, settled in for a few days until I got that under control. And I got that under control with the help of some really talented nurses and therapists. You know, I'm sure they see that all the time. The purpose of me being here is not to whine about it and say, pity, pity me, but because there are people that have a lot greater problems than I do, and I know that, and I'm thankful for that. But at the moment, I'm sure every stroke victim goes through the same thought process, and it's kind of, what did I do to deserve this? Trying to live my life the right way. And so that was a stroke. I had a speech therapist. I had two that were quite wonderful. They wanted to check to see if I had good cognition, had I been affected by the stroke. And it made me angry to do that. I had to go in and they would ask me to do basic math problems. And I wanted to go back to my room and probably watch ESPN or something. It was just painful to go through this process with these people. But we did, and they were wonderful. And you know, then I started thinking, maybe this is good because maybe I have suffered something in my understanding of things or my speech or whatever. And so I got in arguments with one of my speech therapists, Rita Lohr, who is wonderful. And I told her, I said, you know, I like to write, and I write things. How can you write things if you have cognition problems? And she laughed, and she said, well, why don't you write me something? And so I did. And she asked me if I would write something that would relate to my stroke. And I told her that I loved ode poetry. And so I did. I sat down and wrote something. And at the time I wrote it, I was in this state of mind of self-pity and anger, and I thought, well, okay, enough of this. I'm going to write something that's going to be upbeat, motivational, you know, show the world that I'm ready to get going. And the poem turned out probably the way it should and the way stroke victims progress. And the poem apparently hit a lot of nerves. The poem starts out in a positive way because when you look back on it from a stroke at your body, it's an amazing machine. It's just what we can do is just bizarre, not to mention our minds and our brain, but I'm talking about the entire system and all the things that move and function. And when that ceases to exist, it's a frightening, frightening prospect. And it was like, to me, it was like falling off a cliff. And what was the word I used?
Furious moment.
It was a furious moment because it was chaos in your brain. Things are going off, and it's hard to describe to people. I told somebody, I thought I heard an explosion in the hallway. And they said there was no explosion in the hallway. So I don't know anything about that other than that's my thought process during that crazy time. It was furious. It was racing. I was frightened. One of the things about this poem, because it got around, and people would come up to me and say, I read it. And I felt that aloneness, and I felt that anger. And you could sense it just vibrating off of their bodies. And it's an emotional thing. So, well, it's individually, it's cathartic because when I put things on paper, I get them out of my mind and I quit worrying about things. And until I do that, and I've turned that into a nice hobby, and it's a lot of fun for me, and I have a lot of the poetry surrounding all of that. But when it came to the stroke, and I'm in the hospital, I think everybody was kind of surprised that one of their patients had this little hobby of writing poems, and my speech therapist picked up on it and put me to the challenge, So it helped me a great deal, get my mind off of, self-pity and into what happened here, what happened here. Well, I was shocked when I finished. When I finished, I thought it was finished, and I read it back to myself, which is hard to do. You can't hear your own words and critique them sometimes, but I read it and I thought, boy, that's I don't know how excuse me, motivational that sounds, or go get 'em. I was trying to I was trying to create something that would be very hopeful and motivational, and I hope it is in its own way. But I was kind of surprised that it was an angry kind of beginning to the poem, and I was mad. I was very mad. This is the first emotion I felt, not so much fear or hopelessness or anything like that. I was angry that it had happened to me. And I've talked to friends who have suffered similarly, and they go, you're right, it's anger. I was so mad. Why did this happen to me? I had things to do. And so it catches you unaware, and you have to really work hard to overcome that. And you need a lot of help to do that mentally. I found that was the biggest struggle I had. But when I finally came to grips with that, I got to work, and sure enough, I started in bed. I proceeded to a walker with help, a walker by myself, eventually to a cane. And finally, I threw that cane away, and that was a great feeling. So everybody goes there, that's had a stroke. Everybody goes there, and you just have to work your way up and out of it. Occupational therapy, hardest thing I've ever done. Taking little pegs, this is the hand. I used to sit there and say to the finger over here that wouldn't move, I would do my good finger and say, do this. And it would sit there, and I would just strain and struggle to get that finger to move. I mean, that's where stroke victims are for a while. Move, just do something. The first morning that I was taken to therapy, which was the day after I arrived, I was loaded up in a wheelchair and wheeled up to speech therapy. And Jenna, my speech therapist, who is absolutely bright and wonderful and talented. I didn't know all this at the time. They were wheeling me into her office, and she did. She said, "Mr. Taylor, I would like you to do a favor for me and do this little math problem." And do you know what I did? I'm ashamed of it. I grabbed it and I said, "I'm not doing this." I think I said, "I'm not doing this crap." And that's the way we started. And by the time I finished with her, I just respected her so much because she kind of took that little salvo and turned it around on me and kind of brought me in, and we worked together. Yeah, it does take time. It takes a lot of patience. You can't give up on it. I think your first response is to go lay down, and it's more comfortable lying down than working physically at the areas of your body that need the redevelopment. And so that's your first inclination, is to go lie down, but you've got to get up and work. And that's why our therapists and our technicians are so important. They know what needs to occur for the recovery. And it's persistent. You have to be persistent at it. And I could be critical of myself because some days I haven't been as good at it as others, but I really have worked hard at trying to exercise and walk and do the things I need to do to bring it all back into line. Some of the real victims are the family. It's so hard for them. They don't know how to respond, number one. They wish you were better. They want to will themselves on you to be better. It's frustrating for the patient because they're not better. It's a very difficult thing for the family. So this poem, I've had husbands or wives or sons come up to me and say, "I saw your poem. Boy, it really spoke to me. I really appreciate it. It's exactly what we've been going through. But were you really that angry?" And I said, "Yeah, I was, And my wife wouldn't understand. And she would say, move your ankle. Move your ankle when you're walking." I'd say, "I'm trying to move my ankle." They would just want you to do better and better and better. And it could get very frustrating. But the family is afflicted as much, sometimes more so, because their loved one has been stricken, has been taken down a notch. And it's hard. I apologize for, I get him. One of the things stroke victims, and I'm not a stroke victim anymore. I'm a stroke survivor. But one of the things one of our symptoms is we're very emotional. And it's gotten less and less, but I haven't visited this in a while, and it makes you emotional, so. Phew.